Monday, February 28th, 2022 meeting of the Planning and Development Committee.
Recording in progress.
We have a quorum, so I call us to order. And I guess we have a roll call, do we? Oh, we don't need that. Okay, excellent. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes of our regular February 14th meeting?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the minutes of the regular Planning and Development Committee meeting of February 14th, 2022.
Second. Right. Does that need a roll call, though? Voice vote then, please. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Okay, the minutes have been approved. And now we're ready for some, we have public comment. Sherry Fisher.
Thank you so much for hearing my comment. I'm Sheree Fisher. I live in the First Ward, and I am co-chair of the Evanston Environment Board. I also work for the U.S. Forest Service, but I'm not allowed to speak to you in that capacity, so I'm just talking to you as a 20-year resident of Evanston and co-chair of the Environment Board. I would like to speak strongly in support of a tree preservation ordinance. At the Environment Board, I've seen some of the behind-the-scenes development of the ordinance that's being proposed, and I would just urge your support. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And then Cecile McHugh.
Yes, hello. I live within 1,000 feet of the proposed development of the Burger King site at 1740 Orrington. I'm speaking against this planned development because the requested change to D3 zoning is not appropriate for this area, and the requested building height is out of scale for this location. D3 zoning, intended to provide the highest density of business infill development and large-scale redevelopment in downtown Evanston, is not appropriate here. Whereas D2 zoning, which is intended to support traditional downtown shopping in Evanston, is appropriate here and something to encourage. This building will tower over all the other buildings in this vicinity. Excepting the Orrington Hotel, which is nowhere near as tall, in all other directions, there are no other buildings nearby Zone D3. Immediately across are university buildings a few stories tall, and all around on all other sides are zones R6 or D2. Changing from D2, which allows a height of 42 feet, to D3, which allows 86 feet, but asking for 145 feet, is alarming. Ditto for changing from D2, which allows a FAR of 2.75, to D3, which allows a FAR of 4.5, but asking for a FAR of 7 is also alarming. Looking on page 47 of the packet, this building, with the height and bulk it has, positioned seemingly with no space to speak of between it and the little Beck's building immediately to the west, looks ridiculous. How is this even safe to build such a large building immediately next to what looks to be a vintage 4-story building with little space in between? As we know, the public benefits of a planned development must significantly outweigh the negative impact of the development on the surrounding area. The neighbors here enjoy walking past the pedestrian-friendly scale that this lot and the blocks around it now have, and I'm very worried that we're going to jeopardize that with this monstrous office building and the domino effect it's sure to have on the density, height, and scale of the buildings on that block and the blocks around it. I also question why this committee would want to consider recommending zoning changes after recommending an update to the comprehensive plan before that update is complete, which is, I believe, the case. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Calvin Lynn, you signed up to speak about the South Boulevard development, which is not actually on the Planning and Development Committee agenda. It's going to be on our city special order of business at City Council.
Yes. I would just like to, is it okay to speak now?
It would be better if you came to City Council.
Okay.
What?
Well, I just like to agree with the comment that Cecile McHugh made, because Planning Development hasn't did a survey or a impact study about this, the height of this development that's proposed to be 5 stories. which my property is only 2 stories, and it'll be the same abstract or the same monstrosity next door to me, blocking out all the green space and the sunlight, which Hinman and South Boulevard has. The property line and the landscape is all lower level housing going from west to east to Lakeshore Drive until you reach Michigan Avenue. But going north on Hinman, you have several blocks of higher development, which is, I believe, C3, which is appropriate for Hinman, but not appropriate for South Boulevard. So I think the developer needs, and the city needs to reconsider the zoning for the redevelopment of this parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you. And then our final speaker, Brian Knowles, I believe you also are wanting to talk about South Boulevard?
Yeah, but I can withhold until the city council.
Great, okay, thank you very much.
Just a little feedback. It's really kind of confusing knowing when to sign up for a comment.
Sure.
But yeah, I will withhold for now.
Great, okay, thank you. We'll see you later then. So now we're ready to consider item P1. Would someone like to make a motion so we can begin our discussion?
Madam Chair, I'll move item P1, which is Ordinance 15-0-22, amending the zoning map to rezone 1732, 34, and 40 Orrington Avenue from the D2 Downtown Retail Core District to the D3 Downtown Core Development District, and granting a special use for a new 10-story mixed-use planned development avenue at those addresses.
Second.
Okay, and I believe we have a presentation. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Johnny Carlson with Trammell Crow Company. I'm the applicant. You'll hear from myself and Matt Blewett at ESG Architects throughout this presentation. Thank you for your time this evening. We're excited to be back in front of you, albeit a different development. We delivered and leased a building called Avidor Evanston that we're excited to be back in front of you for our second project. So if you look at this slide deck here, I just want to outline the building on the left is the building we recently delivered. At 55 plus, age restricted, 169 unit development with all affordable units on site. The middle image and the right image are also 2 projects. They're not in your community, they're actually in downtown Chicago, but we wanted to point them out as they are life science office buildings, and that is the research lab building that we're here to talk about from a use perspective. So just to talk a little bit about the trends of what we're seeing, where the economy is going, there's a large amount of capital and venture capital going into life science, material science, AI, therapeutics, and that's really driven by science meeting technology. So historically, you see these buildings in and around Cambridge, a number of the large institutions such as Northwestern, in a private and public sector, but this is 100% private development, no subsidy requested, and it's a 100% non-affiliated project with Northwestern University. So just to set the stage on that, we're following trends. We are the first developer to deliver Class A life science space in and around Chicagoland, and we view that ecosystem of where the universities are with University of Chicago, Northwestern, all the Big Ten universities who are really spinning out companies and talent and ideas. And where do they put it? They put it on the coast because there's no laboratory space here locally. So we have had success in the city. We continue to have success. We're seeing a large amount of demand for this, and there are a number of users that want to be near education universities such as Northwestern, and we are seeing a lot of requirements coming out of Northwestern, but there's no Class A space here locally without affiliation with the university. So that is the project, that is the use. Office will come with the labs, and labs will come with the office, and we think that this is a great driver to keep jobs in Evanston. Just to talk a little bit about the location, this is the corner, the former Burger King. I'll use that quickly because I know everyone's very familiar with that site. It's a very unique site. It's entry point to Evanston, and it's right adjacent to the university, and we think it's a prime corner for redevelopment. It is vacated. It's dilapidated. There is no use there other than a few cars that park there illegally from time to time. So we're excited to hopefully bring life to that corner and do it in a way that's adherent to the stakeholders of the community like we develop in usually. Zooming in close on the site, this is approximately 21,500 square feet. As outlined, it's being requested by our team to deliver a D3 versus D2. The Orrington, the hotel just to the south of the alley, is D3, and we think in context, height, and scale, our height request is within the plan development. It's actually below the allocable allowances that we could ask for. When determining the exact size, we looked at the scale, context, and really trying to design a building that fit within that for years to come. Moving in from a bird's eye perspective, this is the bird's eye looking southwest. So you can see before the building is delivered, and then you can see it after. So in the upper image, you can spin around from an aerial northwest, the southwest view, and the southeast view. And Matt Blewett is going to walk you through a large amount of the design slides as we go through, but I wanted to really end on this slide here. We heard importance of safety, we heard importance of activating the street, importance of height and scale, so we elected to bury the parking, spend those dollars to put it below grade, so none of the parking is actually above grade, so you'll hear about that here on the next slide. The blue area is about 5,000 square feet of restaurant space to really activate that in a 24/7 impact there. And then really surrounding it on all active uses. In addition to the active uses, we also looked at safety from a curb cut perspective. There are more curb cuts than what we're going to propose here that you'll see tonight. We actually have no curb cuts in addition to the alley, so all of our loading, all of our ingress, egress from a public safety, and you've probably seen the notes from Dapper and other, we had their support because we are ingress, egress all off that public alley. In addition, you'll hear we're improving some of the streetscape. We're improving the alley. We're repaving the entire alley beyond our sight lines that we'll work through. So really just to show you that yellow area is for all the office patrons coming and going from the laboratory or the office space. The blue is active retail, and then really back of house for science, innovation. A lot of back of house use is required. So we're really putting that on the alley side of the building. So with that, I'm going to invite Matt Blewett up here with ESG Architects, and if there are any questions, I'm joined by Morgan Bear Blaska at Trammell Crow Company, Lou Abuna at KLOA from a traffic impact and parking, if you have any questions on that topic, and then Rich Clawwater at DLA Piper is our zoning attorney. So thank you again. Really excited to be in front of you tonight, and I'll invite Matt Blewett up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny, and thanks, Council. Again, Matt Blewett, ESG Architects. We'll start here at the lower level, as Johnny mentioned. We've buried all the parking, so 35 parking spaces, in addition, 8 motorcycle stalls included. It's also where our stormwater detention would be, as well as some back of house and ancillary spaces. Just to touch a little bit on the first floor, which Johnny gave a pretty apt description of, working from the top left or northwest around clockwise, we have our main office entry lobby. In the yellow there, just to the right of that, the purple space is actually our on-site bike parking, so 40 spaces inside the building for office users, as well as, it's not showing up on this plan, but there's 3 bike racks on the northwest corner on the exterior of the building. Large active use that wraps all the way from the Clark frontage down the Orrington side to give us as much active use as we can get on the site, and then again, as Johnny mentioned, access for parking and for loading off of the south alley space, as well as to the west, just kind of burying as much of the electrical and mechanical requirements that we can fit on the grade level of the building. One thing we didn't really touch on was where you can see the planters along Orrington. The 2 that are to the farthest northeast or the upper right are pulled back to allow a larger sidewalk area for potential sidewalk seating for a future cafe or a restaurant user for that active use. So the second floor, it's kind of a unique floor. One thing to highlight here is that to the upper left in the entry condition, we're proposing a double height space to make that entry lobby very inviting and maybe a potential art opportunity or lighting installation to be visible from the street. This is the third floor, so this is where you'll see the building mass steps back from the street, from the property lines. So the green area is a green roof area that would be above the second floor, and then this third floor starts kind of the typical tower. We'll zoom in on this one. This is our typical floor plate, levels 4 through 9. So what you're seeing here with the offset core to the left, the area in gray, shows all of our elevatoring, toilets, stairs, pushed to the far west of the site in order to give us the largest, most open floor plate for laboratory planning. What we've learned with these users is that flexibility is key. We model on the building itself is built on an 11-foot module to accommodate the lab spacing for their casework requirements. So the building's really purpose-built. Another feature of the building at the far northeast corner, the top right corner, is a balcony. So each tenant has a tenant balcony that helps soften around that edge, views towards the lake and to the university. One more thing you'll see in the elevations, but I'll mention here, is the floor-to-floor heights for this building are taller than you see in a traditional office buildings. For these life science users, we're using 14.5 foot module, as opposed to something in the 10 to 12 foot range you might see in a typical office user. This provides the extra ceiling space for mechanicals and the increased air and electrical loads that these users need. So what we're showing is just kind of a typical potential layout. We have labs kind of wrapping the east and south facade, and then showing open office kind of on the north elevation. Our top floor, or top occupiable floor, level 10, is the amenity space. So a few program elements we're considering including here. We've got a large boardroom in the upper left or the northwest, a large lounge area that would open onto a roof terrace area, that's shown in gray and green to the right of the screen. And then to the south of the screen in the red and then the darker red is a fitness program, as well as lockers that would be used both for fitness as well as the bike commuters. Our highest level is a full floor penthouse. These buildings, as I think I've already alluded to, have a much higher mechanical electrical demand than a traditional office building. So a full floor is appropriate to get all the equipment housed in an enclosed space, so it's not as visible to the users or to the community. Quickly, just to touch on the site plan, I think the biggest takeaways here is that we'll be continuing the ornamental paving on Orrington, as well as continuing the paving as it's shown on Clark, continuing what's happening to the west. In this proposal, we are replacing the entire alley from Orrington to Sherman, running east-west. Our landscape plan, we've been working with forestry and landscape to address species of planting. We're going to include both perennial and evergreen planting so that the planted environment will be vibrant both in winter and in the summer months. So we'll just quickly go through some of the proposed plantings. This is a view from the northeast, looking back towards the building. I think a couple of elements to point out here. We've softened the corner at Orrington and Clark, both at the podium level and the tower level, as a way to kind of break down the bulk of the building and ease that edge to make it a smoother transition at that acute angle. In addition to that, both the north and the east facade has a gentle arc to, again, try and soften the building's mass, as well as give visual interest along its facade. You can see here the podium, where the podium set back, and then level 3 sets back for the tower. It's a pedestrian level experience. This would be the cafe sidewalk seating area on Orrington. So proposing a lot of kind of nice articulation to this facade, as well as recesses that could be used at times of inclement weather. Proposed sidewalk seating, downlighting, just try to give a nice pedestrian experience using warm, natural tone materials. So the north elevation, just really quickly to highlight here, you can see kind of the shadow lines on the tower. We're showing a window extension on the curtain wall, so that gives you that kind of visual interest and tactility as you look at that north facade. And then as you work to the right of the screen, you can kind of see the key corner, as we call the gateway corner as you're coming in on Elgin or Clark, really presenting the building to the neighborhood. Here you can see the west facade. You can see how the building is made up of two masses, essentially, a larger, taller mass that's slender, where the mechanical penthouse is, and then the more champagne or bronze-colored mass to the left side of the screen. On the west side, we are doing our best to articulate that facade. It is arcing gently, as well as the metal panels you see have dimension to themselves, so we'll get a closer detail of that. In addition, in working with Councilmember Kelly and on a call, we looked at trying to put deeper and wider recesses into the floor plate near where the elevator lobbies are, as well as into the restrooms. So trying to really articulate that facade as much as possible. Here's a straight-on elevation of that west facade, and then on the upper inset on the left, it kind of shows you how those panels undulate and give you kind of a waveform feeling as they kind of triangles to each other. So you get the light of play, or light and shadow, a lot of play on that facade. Where you see those wider window openings, those are actually pushed into the building, so they're pushed off the facade ever so slightly to give some depth. We've introduced a new metal panel material on the far right to break up the long expanse of that kind of champagne metal panel, just to make that feel like a little shorter. Rendering of the entry conditions, so you can see the double height space here, proposing some kind of an art installation in that ceiling space to make it very inviting for both guests and passersby. You can see our bike kind of parking out in the front of that planter as well. And we'll just roll around from the pedestrian level, kind of views of the building's pedestrian experience. I'll go through the elevations. We can stop here. We can see again, we're changing the material on the far right on the southwest corner of the stair and providing those deeper recesses into the window system. Here we can see this is the north looking south, so to speak, to our ziggurat. The area in blue shows our property line, so everything in blue is where we're set off of the property line. The podium level is essentially on the property line, and then the tower itself sets back twice. Material palette that we're working with, trying to keep it very natural, muted tones. We think that that's the best, will fit in best with the neighborhood context. A lot of limestone and brick materials around, so trying to stay within that kind of warmer, more naturalistic tones. In the bottom left, you can see some real-world examples of how we think those dimensional panels and those kind of shingled panels might come together. Just some of the features at the pedestrian level, again, looking at downcast lighting, cafe seating, just really proud materials, opportunities for signage to make it very neighborhood feeling. And again, likewise at the entry. Some of our lighting solutions on site, trying to do as many downlight and bird-friendly lighting as we can. Just where we anticipate our main signage would be a monument sign on the Clark elevation near the main entrance, and then signage for our parking and loading off of the alley, so keeping that discreet. Comparison with some of the surrounding buildings in terms of height. Our low floor area, and as mentioned, we are seeking a 7.0 FAR for this project. Some of our bird-friendly strategies, we've worked with Bird-Friendly Evanston and we'll continue to work with them as we progress our design. I think our main takeaways is that where possible, and it will be most of the building, that will have programmable, dimmable lights. So after hours, there will not be lights shining throughout the building where there's not an open, per se, active use on the first floor or something of that nature. On the facade zones 1, which is both the podium level, so from level 3 down, and level 10 above the green roof area near the amenity, we're proposing the use of all metal railings, that is no glass, or if we do use glass, we've committed to using bird-friendly glass, so fritted glass on those railings if they are. In addition to that, we're going to work continually with the bird-friendly group as well as our landscape architects to define the locations and appropriate height of plantings such that it will reduce the number of potential bird strikes. Quickly, we'll go through our ingress and egress. Working with the city and numerous iterations of this, we've we've moved our loading and our parking to where we think is best access and safest for this location. So this is showing a loading truck coming in and exiting, or parking, and then leaving along Sherman, so in through Orrington, and Sherman. And then for our office tenants, the parking for vehicular parking, left side is ingress, right side is egress in either direction. I think big takeaway here is we've moved this ramp further east at the expense of shifting a column out of place to get it to be the best possible solution to turning into this particular garage. I will hand the public benefit back over to Johnny. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We tried to keep it at 10 minutes, so I'll move here pretty swiftly. We really just wanted to outline some of the public benefits. We've had a number of community meetings, had Councilmember Kelly and myself on a few Zoom calls through the COVID environment. We've also conducted, obviously, DAPR, addressed some of the bird-friendly items that we've heard, and I know at Plan and Land Use, I guess I should say Land Use, Leslie Sod, who's here, and a few others, I think we feel like we have a good design to address some of those concerns here within that. So working our way top to bottom, this is not a housing project, obviously, but we are stewards of affordable housing. We delivered our past project with all of the units on site, so we want to contribute $250,000. We know that our employees will want to live in the area. We hope they want to live in the area and shop at the retail establishments, et cetera. So we do want to contribute and hopefully put dollars towards building more affordability in the community. Also, we heard throughout the process that you're delivering 35 parking stalls on site, but we're also leasing off-site stalls to contribute to that revenue source for the city. In addition, we want to make sure there's other modes of transportation, so we're paying for that divvy station. It's about $65,000 commitment. We're also knowing that our patrons are going to come to and from work and public transportation, so we wanted to commit $100,000 to the Public Transit Improvement Fund. And then again, I mentioned the elimination of 2 curb cuts, adding on-street parking stalls by closing those curb cuts for the public to park. which comes at approximate $10,000 increment. Installation of a transit tracker board to make sure people know how to get to and from, and hours of not waiting outside and clogging up any congestion areas, which is a public benefit of approximately $25,000. Looking at the alley, that was a big one we heard. That this original process was we were only improving the alley adjacent to our site. Through the process, we committed to almost triple that contribution, redo the entire all the way to Sherman, which is approximately $235,000 that we're stomaching as the developer. In addition, we're agreeing to bury all the utility lines as a public benefit along this south alley there that is looked upon by not only the hotel but some of the housing area, which is about $100,000. In addition, on the last meeting, we committed to $50,000 to improve furniture, other areas of outdoor seating, activities, aesthetic improvements to downtown Evanston, which is a total approximate public benefit about $835,000 in total. Other benefits, lowercase public benefits, not to be counted as property owners pay taxes, et cetera, but I just want to walk through, obviously, an area that needs some improvement from the existing conditions with the Burger King, implementing bird-friendly features beyond that we've committed to. Retail, we're committed to putting that hard corner as an active restaurant, which we think is a big improvement. Also safety and 24/7. Construction jobs, we're committing to having job fairs, trying to hire local. Power Construction is one of the vendors that we've used in and around the area downtown, and they are stewards of making sure we're reaching out and running that process to put Evansonians at work. So we're committed to that, and we will do that. Job creation, we think that not only are we going to have a few hundred people, probably 600 to 1,000 people visiting this building throughout the day, if at full capacity, but those people are going to need to eat and shop and dine and hopefully buy homes and really support Evanston from the ground up. Looking at the new street trees, we're adding those to some of the facade, and then stormwater detention existing right now, it's just all on surface and it's running off. We were going to upgrade that to existing codes, put a stormwater vault below our ramp, and really enhance that from a runoff perspective. And then this is a big one that goes unnoticed, but over 20 years, about the current taxes are very little on that site, and we anticipate at stabilization, once we achieve that over 20 years, it'll be about $45 million in taxes. And if you net present value that to today's dollars, it's about $20 million of increased taxes that we'll pay beyond what's there today for that tax bill. So we think that's big. Just wanted to point that out, and I will wrap up our presentation, and thank you again, and we're here for questions.
Great, thank you. So Councilmember Reed, you're jumping in.
Yes, thank you for the one. This is a very thoughtful building. The design, I think, is a good design. It's a beautiful design, I think, and I think will be an addition to our downtown. I'm curious. So the public benefits that you listed there, the $835,000 in public benefits, is that for bonuses essentially?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a trade-off for floor area ratio bonus. I may have missed that. Sorry, as in the
yeah. Sorry. So the we're asking for as a plan development to go within that. There's 4 areas. It's FAR. It's a ziggurat setback. It's height. And parking, I believe, is the 4, if I capture that. So
and also, I mean, I'm perfectly happy with the parking reduction. That's for folks who, that's a big thing. And I appreciate that you're having the bike stations. I think that's almost something we should require by code for new developments and for particularly housing developments. What I will say to the committee, what Chicago does, and I think this is. Chicago's model is pretty good, and I think you guys are probably developed in Chicago, and so you know that Chicago doesn't allow you to give money for bonuses, and that you just pay the money that you would pay, and the city uses it the way. Instead of providing public benefits that honestly make your development more attractive, and it makes it more attractive to your tenants, it's you just give the city the money, and the city does what they need to do in order to make the area better. I will say, with that in mind, I do like most of the public benefits that you're offering. The one that I have a question about is the $65,000 for a divvy station. That I don't know how necessary and how much of a public benefit that is. There's a number of divvy stations downtown, and divvy isn't at this point priced in a manner that allows for folks to, it almost feels more like a kind of leisure luxury thing rather than an actual mode of transportation. And I say that as someone who does not own a car and, uses divvy from time to time. But other than that, I think this is a good project. I think I haven't talked to Councilmember Kelly a ton about this, but certainly interested to hear some of her thoughts. But this seems like a good project, so thank you.
Thank you very much. And just so everyone knows, we were at one of the community meetings, or DAPR, it was suggested to provide divvy parking, so that's when we added that. So it was really based on feedback. We totally agree. There's multi-modes of transportation, so we tried to adhere to what we heard from the community. But that's great comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wynn is next.
Yes, thank you very much. I do like this project as well. I think we're accomplishing a number of things here. One, when the Burger King closed, I don't think there was a single person in Evanston who cried a tear about it. So we're removing a problematic property that unfortunately our police department had to visit 24 hours a day. And we're bringing in a type of business, a type of building that I will say that the city has been trying to get for at least 8 or 9 years. When we were building a property at the corner of Main and Chicago, we requested John O'Donnell, who was the developer there, to go and talk to the university and suggest a lab building just like this. Unfortunately, the professors at Northwestern thought it was a little too far away. But they did say they needed it. And so here is this building within a stone's throw. And even 7-8 years ago, we knew that the value of having this type of building available right, as you said, right off the university property. These are being built all over the country and at these large universities that are spinning off businesses all the time. And this is our way of capturing that. The value, an additional value of Northwestern is capturing these types of businesses. So thank you for bringing that forward. It's something that we have been we recognize we have a need for, and now here it is. So I like that you're opening up the sidewalk, especially given what we've experienced during COVID. We recognize that people like to spend more time outdoors, and so I think having a restaurant there would really make that corner much more user-friendly and providing a seating space. It's like a plaza. I really like how you're breaking up the facade of the building. Once again, referencing Main and Chicago, another building that's contemporary, very glassy, but if you look at it, has the facade. There is no flat space on the facade at all, and it really, I have never heard a complaint about that building, and the third ward is really opinionated. So I think that the attention to detail on this and the recognition that it is in a prominent spot, and so you're paying attention to good materials is really important. I think making sure that that's followed through really will make the difference in whether how the building looks and how it lasts in our downtown. Once again, Main and Chicago is going to last for a long time, looking really interesting for decades. The building directly across the street from it already looks tired and old. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate that you're working with our bird-friendly group. And the affordable housing contribution is significant, and most critically, in some ways, 600 to 1,000 people in our downtown, which they haven't been there. And this is a way of pulling them there and helping all of the economic health of all of our downtown. So I think, and I am someone who has a reputation for not supporting some buildings in our downtown, but I think looking over the zoning analysis, I don't think that you're exceeding any of the site development allowances. You've softened the corner. The design is very good for the site, and we're going to hold you to those very nice building materials, because that's what's going to make the difference. So I think that this is a good building, and it's a new use that we don't have and desperately need.
Thank you, Councilmember Wynn. I think kudos to staff and kudos to Councilmember Kelly. We've had a number of meetings on those design items of softening the edges and trying to really articulate that on a unique site. So I think you said it well, and I won't rehash it, but thank you very much for your comments.
And Councilmember Nusma?
So you're building this building as a purpose-built laboratory building, which makes it fancier than just a regular old office building.
Correct. I'll use the word fancier just from an infrastructure standpoint, from more power, more air, more heavy loads to be administered on the floors, higher clear heights for equipment. So it's not like you can do this in any other building around this area. This is purpose-built for that. And we're doing it in the city, and we're doing it all over the coast, and we want to do it in
So that makes it a little bit more expensive of a development.
It's a lot more expensive,
to
yes.
add those additional systems in there. You mentioned 600 to 1,000 people. Is that, full-time jobs working at that facility once it's up and running, or is that just people coming in and out? Like, how many of those people will be there all day, every day?
That's a great question. So I use a range because we're building this on specs, meaning there's no commitments from any tenants. Our financing's in place to be able to get this building out of the ground. And so I use the range depending on the level of science. I would say science buildings are less dense than traditional office. So that's why the range there, depending on how much lab or how much office is within that. And those would typically be full-time employees. The reason I use the upper end is there's events on the roof and building in STEM talent and really job fairs, et cetera. Those are going to be the items that kind of drives that up for those one-off peaks. But I think 650 is a good range to use for this style of building at a minimum.
Right. And you are building it on spec, so
yes.
You fully anticipate that you will have tenants once this project is
correct.
built.
Yes, there's a lot of demand for this. We're getting calls since we've administered this. We don't respond to those because until we go through the process of the due course with you all to get to that point. But we feel that this building, there's zero vacancy in Evanston, and there's very little space even in the Illinois itself. And look at the universities that are here, and look at the talent that's here. There's no reason that Evanston shouldn't be just like Cambridge in 20 years.
So you're not doing this in collaboration with Northwestern, but has there been any communication with Northwestern affiliated professors or researchers?
No, people have reached out just with, hey, we're really excited this is coming to our town. Tell us more, but that's all that we've had.
Okay. Question about the environmental aspects of the building. I appreciate you working with the bird-friendly folks. I want to make sure that the agreements that you've come to with Bird Friendly Evanston actually come to pass, and as I understand it, they're written into the ordinance.
Yes, and we should clarify. We've had I think three calls or 3 Zooms at a minimum. We're adhering to the items that we've discussed. We're footing the balconies or metal on those balconies of Zone 1, which are in the top and the lower section of the building. The middle building is not as critical. We've committed to that. We've also committed to working on landscaping and a number of up-down lighting to adhere to that. We are not going to achieve the LEED credit itself. I think right now the ordinance is written a little bit gray on but to achieve that, your whole building and a number of things that you can't even quantify or even know you can achieve until you build it and look back. So we do want to clarify, we are satisfying all the comments we've heard. We've landed on an area that they're comfortable, we're comfortable, and everything in that exhibit in the packet from a bird-friendly perspective is going to be committed to on our behalf.
Right, and the ordinance we're approving tonight does refer to the LEED 5 or whatever the designation is for the birds. So.
Yes, it refers to the credit, and that was never the intent of actually achieving and committing to the credit. It was committing to those areas of importance.
Understood. As long as we're talking about environmental issues, did you give any thought to making this building all electric?
We did. It's a unique use given it's a lab. So there are some things that you can't achieve doing laboratory with an all electric, but we are looking at ways to create efficiencies. We're committing to LEED Silver, obviously, per the ordinance. For instance, the 2 buildings in downtown Chicago, we committed to LEED Silver, and we're achieving, one of them has been gold, and one of them is any day now to hear that we are going to achieve gold. So we look at best practices, part of being part of a national developer. We're the most active developer in the country, and we look at trends and how to do things the right way, and we're forward-thinking. So from the ground up, from material sourcing to exhausting the right vendors and really delivering on a sustainable building for years to come is really what we like to set precedent.
But at this point, state-of-the-art does not allow a laboratory building like this to be built.
Yeah, because
as
there's
all
just, yes,
electric.
correct. But a large majority of it will be electric.
Got it, okay. And one final question about the traffic study. If I could ask the representative from the KLOA to address this. You did a traffic study, but traffic volume was increased due to COVID, which struck me as odd. So I just wanted to see what was behind that.
No problem. Thank you. My name is Louis Abuna. I'm with KLOA. So when we conducted the counts, obviously it was during the last few weeks or last few months when COVID is still going on. So what we did is we compared those counts with data that we have from previous studies that we have conducted in the area, and to make sure that they represent kind of pre-pandemic normal traffic conditions. So what we found is some of those numbers were lower. So we adjusted them up to kind of reflect the normal traffic conditions. So that's what we did as far as base traffic conditions to reflect normal traffic conditions.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm done.
Okay. So before I go back to Councilmember Reed, does anyone who hasn't had a question yet want to say anything? Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I do quickly want to say, speaking of the 65,000 I mentioned with Divvy, and my memory was jogged by a statement that Councilmember Wynn made about no one being sad that this building, that the Burger King is gone. I'm not particularly sad that the Burger King is gone either. But what I do recall is anyone who had the misfortune of needing to go or wanting to go to that Burger King anytime late at night would know that that was a spot where homeless folks congregated to stay warm at night. And also that Burger King employed folks with disabilities as well, and so that was a spot, albeit not the inappropriate spot, but because it was open 24 hours, it's a place that folks went to stay warm, to get food. The staff there seemed extremely welcoming to those folks, and I saw folks cleaning up and getting food, and so I would, rather than a divvy station, I would love to see, I know that there's potentially some new developments going on in the 4th Ward that would help house homeless folks. I'd love to see that $65,000 or $100,000 go to supporting homelessness to address. We have a major loss with this Burger King for folks, and I'd love to see efforts made to address that as someone who personally was formerly homeless and understands the need for places for folks who are homeless to go when they have no other resources.
Director Neiden.
Good evening. I'm looking at Assistant City Attorney Ruggie. We can work with the developer if that is the direction. However, I just want to point out we have to make sure that there's a nexus of public benefit with this specific property. So we have to make sure that the public benefit. So we've done the affordable housing. That's fun. That's something different than directing money towards a different development in a different area. So we just have to make sure that we're directing it to a specific city fund that, to your point, addresses a concern that's downtown. So I just want to make sure. I'm sure you're not suggesting we send it to another development. I think you're suggesting we address issues of homelessness in the downtown. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. And yeah, we can use the money. There's a developer, another one in the 1st Ward, I think right across or very close by, who their proposal, at least what they've presented to me, is that they want to build affordable housing in the 8th Ward to support the building, to relieve their affordable housing requirements downtown. And they seem quite convinced that they could do that.
No, they cannot. That's still also a nexus of public benefit issue. So I would just say either we...
And I will say, understanding Chicago's ordinance, so are you saying this is a self-imposed nexus of public benefit? Because understanding Chicago's ordinance, where you don't pay for public benefit, for bonuses, you just pay a fee, and then the city there's, I think, two separate funds that the money goes to. One is a fund that can be spent, one in the area, and then another fund that can be spent outside of the area. So is this a self-imposed rule, or is this some state?
Well, this is slightly confusing. Chicago's, my understanding, is a little bit more prescribed public benefits. So they say if you do X, you have to do Y. So we have like the green building ordinance is something that we require by ordinance. So the development before us, they knew when they did their due diligence, they knew they would have to comply with our green building ordinance. That helps move forward the city council's policies of green building and sustainability. It is codified. They know they have to do it. That's expected. We've had discussions before the council about what to do with public benefits in terms of being a little bit more prescribed in that. We have not made any inroads into making those decisions. It probably would be a clearer and easier process to understand for everybody, but we haven't gotten there yet. So in terms of the issue before, not saying you can put things in other places, then you would potentially have the situation where you'd have 9 council members who would each say, here's what I want in my ward. And I realize that could seem very reasonable, but at the same time, the idea is to offset the impact of the development in the specific adjacent area. So you don't come to a situation where you have something being built and another part of the city benefiting when the actual location might be quote unquote losing.
So thank you for that, and I won't belabor the point, but also I wonder, are we mixing public benefits and impact fees? Because I definitely know impact fees definitely would have to be in the area. Public benefit seems a bit looser to me, but that's a conversation we can have offline. I hear your.
Be happy to have that conversation offline.
But certainly, if there is agreement with the committee, I personally would prefer to see, rather than a divvy station that doesn't really seem yet to be meeting the goals of providing mobility for folks, that money would go to addressing homelessness, which was definitely something, albeit Burger King was not a proper shelter for folks, but it served as a place where folks were sheltered and got food. So if we can, offset that impact, I'd just love to see that, some of the funds go to that. And if we can work offline with the developer to have that before this comes back, I'd love to see that.
I think from our commitment, we'll work with staff and the law department to come up with, we're fine swapping things out if it can be done, but just, we'll work with you if you need to add something.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. And thank you for the accommodations. I've been trying to take on sort of the overbearing feel of this building, particularly on the west side. So I appreciate Mr. Blewett, your efforts there. Is that's setback or popped out in order to create that extra dimensionality there? That on the west side, right next to because there's a huge drop. Initially, I asked that the elevator, that west side where the elevator shaft is, if we could put that against the Orrington building, to me that would have been much more appropriate. But for structural reasons, that couldn't happen because this is the entranceway to Evanston from the north side. So it's so important when coming in that we don't just hit a big wall. So you've been working with me to try and reduce that sort of imposing feel. We have Little Beck's bookstore there, and then this. So adding some dimension there. So thank you. I see that you did.
Yeah, and it is an inset, just to clarify. So right here you can see we carved away here and then at the stair and at the elevator lobby. It's kind of hard to see in this drawing, so I apologize. It's very zoomed out, but it's a kind of a small move, but I think it does a lot. It gives you those shadow lines. You get return material, which just gives you more depth to the feeling of that facade. Doesn't have a flatness, maybe as you might have seen before. So incorporating as many windows as we think we can have per code, as well as getting some more of that depth where we don't have those structural limitations that you mentioned that we have at the elevator core.
Thank you. And I think, Johanna, it's important that you really go over all the variances here so everybody understands. I still would I'm waiting for our city to conduct independent parking and traffic studies. I just feel that's so important for residents and for everybody to know that we're also conducting ours. Also, just on some of these images, I think you're citing it to be, and just so everybody understands, this really is going to be the tallest building for about 3 blocks all around. So I just want to make that clear. The height is really the height of that mechanical, and I think you're citing the height in your the images, you're not citing that height, which I think is 170, correct?
Yeah, we're citing per the code, and they don't count mechanical space. So it'll be the upper level, the amenity space, which is 10. 11 is technically a double height amenity for that mechanical space that any building they don't measure that per their code.
Okay, but I just think when we're comparing, like at Orrington, you go and you cite that little, what's it called? A
Cupola.
Cupola at the end there, which is really tiny compared to the mechanical amenity space on this building. So really, we really shouldn't be comparing that lower side. So it's really about, I think I figured it was, it's the difference between 106 feet really and 170. I think we just have to be a little more accurate in comparing the heights here.
Yeah, and I guess it is, we're just following the staff on how to use one number from a height perspective. But it's also why we also step back that area and kind of plan for the mechanical versus putting the mechanical spread out over the entire building. So you have a step back on level 3, and then you have a step back here. If you're a pedestrian here, you don't see that from there. You only see it on the west. So the goal was to try to notch the building and really address the west facade with the offset core. And Matt Blewett talked about the additional height of that floor, but it's a small section.
Yeah, I think you touched on it. I mean, the building height is 149.5. That's to the upper slab of that mechanical penthouse. So the penthouse there rises currently, it's an 18-foot floor to floor to the slab for the high roof. And then there's probably about a 2-foot parapet. So you can say on the order of about 20 feet above. So 170 is
Right.
about where we're at.
So I really think those are the heights we should be looking at with regard to the Orrington.
I agree.
too.
Just trying to be
You
in
got that
terms
from
with
staff.
the code or the zoning ordinance, that is.
Yeah. So that's, again, thank you. I appreciate your working to try and make this as pedestrian friendly. And again, I'd love to see a true ziggurat. And we discussed that this really, that the floor right above it actually bumps back out. I'd love to see that continue all the way up. But I agree with everything that's been said. I do think this is a lovely design. I appreciate the curvature. I know that's a big deal to put that on there. That absolutely helps. And yes, John, would you mind going over the variances for the public and all the
Sure.
council?
Just to be clear, they're not variances, they're site development
Site
allowances.
development.
So an FAR of 7 where 4.5 is permitted and up to 8 can be requested. A ziggurat setback of 6.4 feet to 11 feet where a minimum of 40 feet is required at the building height of 32 feet along Orrington Avenue. A height of 149.5 feet where 85 is allowed and up to 170 can be requested. And 35 on-site parking stalls where a minimum of 213 is required.
Thank you. So I think probably the one that jumps out the most is the parking. So I think there's some concerns with neighbors about the parking and how that will play out. And again, could you address when we will be conducting our own independent parking and
So
traffic
we've
analysis?
done a request for proposals, and we've received responses. The direction, if you recall, we had a discussion item last fall or late summer. I can't remember when we were in person. So to look at an independent option, meaning the city would do their own traffic analysis. We do not in the city of Evanston have the staff capacity nor the technical data sets and other equipment that would be able to do that. So generally developers or any applicant where we might require a traffic study would do that work, and then we review it. Our staff reviews it. So we've gone out. They came back quite expensive for us based on because we asked for something more than just a traffic study. We did multimodal, so parking, ride share, all other modes of transportation, bike traffic. So it's a little bit more expensive. So we're going to come back on the 14th and ask what direction you'd like to do. I think that I'm going to kind of blow the lead here, but I think that we'd like to see some code changes in terms of what we would require from a traffic study base, because right now it just says a traffic study. So it's up to whoever is required to do it to interpret what a traffic study is. So codify a few more requirements and then get some direction of if we want to require people to take one of our pre-qualified applicants for traffic study, or we would do our own. We would employ somebody to do the study. However, that would require some budget considerations because they're not inexpensive. I think the number was somewhere around $35,000 per study. So if we have a few of these developments per year, that is definitely a budget consideration.
So I do think it's important that we resolve that soon as developments are going up, because it's absolutely a very big concern. And I'd just like to say also here and now, like, I would like, I don't know whether it's a proviso or what it is, that in the future, this privilege of, changing the zone from D2 to D3 here, that is really limited to this building, going west on Clark there, like all the way to Benson. I really don't want to see that. Any more buildings changing zone there from D2 to D3. I want to be able to really respect and preserve the historic and architectural scale of the existing buildings, and the atmosphere as you go around onto Sherman of our sort of traditional downtown Evanston. So I'm going to state that over and over again. I want this would be limited really to this building going west there on Benson. So, thank you.
Great, thank you.
I had very quick questions, yeah, and then we can, I'll be done. One, just a quick question for, I guess, staff. My recollection of the code isn't informing me as to whether, do TOD parking reductions, transit-oriented development parking reductions, apply to this kind of use, or does it only apply to housing? So do you get the TOD parking reductions if you're building an office building like this, or do you only get it if you're building housing?
I believe it's just for housing. Katie Ashbaugh is on the line. Katie, can you confirm?
Hi, I'm Katie Ashbaugh. I'm a planner and work with Johanna. So the downtown parking reduction it takes away the first 3,000 square feet that's of the least generating use. And so for the total number of square footage for the parking requirement for the office use, we took 3,000 from that and then applied the required parking ratio to the office use. And then after that, you then only do 80% of the total number of required stalls. So to your point, Councilmember Reed, we do have the TOD parking reduction for residential units based on the number of bedrooms. For example, we require just over half of a stall for studio units, but they require one stall, I believe, for when they're not in a TOD. But those are the two, it's a parking deduction and then a parking reduction. Little confusing, but I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. So what I'm hearing is that downtown for offices, there's a completely separate formula that is used that isn't our transit-oriented development formula for housing. It's a separate formula. So that's something new. So thank you for that. So there is some kind of parking reduction. I wonder if we should take a look at that. I know that we put some specific effort into a few years ago, at this point almost 5-6 years ago, to creating requirements for affordable housing. It's probably, Councilmember Wynn can maybe know this better than I do, but it's probably been a while since we've revisited our parking requirements for office buildings or for other developments downtown, and seeing where we're trending toward, which is reducing car usage, ride sharing, biking, and all of those alternative modes of transportation. I wonder if it's time to look at to revisit that. So it's not TOD, but it's some other section of code, which offline I'll figure out what that is. And then secondly, and then I have one more thing after that, is for parking and traffic studies. Johanna, is it standard for, do we do a parking study or traffic study with does the city itself conduct it for every, and I wonder if that is,
right.
I understand Councilmember Kelly's concerns, and I totally get it, but I do wonder if that's an expense that the city shouldn't necessarily take on if we have developers going to a trusted traffic engineer or whatever firm does this kind of work, I think we should, unless there's something that really seems wacky to us, work on that. I don't know if the city, again, with my beliefs, I don't know if the city should really be in the business of determining the number of parking spots that a business should have. And then lastly, for the developer, have you all, it sounds like you have, but have you all done developments or constructed buildings in Chicago?
Yes, we have.
And so just what is your opinion? Do you prefer the Chicago system where you just go in and you pay for your bonuses versus having to come up with these public benefits, or what system do you prefer?
It's a great question. I think it depends is the short answer. I would say that we've had great success in both municipalities, and I think that's how I'll leave it, but sorry for that.
Well answered.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Of course he's going to say.
Okay, so I see no more lights, so I believe we are going to be ready for a vote. Whoopsie, oh, Councilmember Burns.
This will be
jumping
quick,
in.
though. This will be
Okay.
quick. Because I don't really know how to do it for these type of projects. I need to put some more thought into it. But I would like to see developments, especially when they're requesting things of the city, to put as much planning into workforce development as they do, parking and some of the other things we heard about today. So I would love, I don't know where this is in the approval process, but we've put, for example, there's a light manufacturing proposal development that's proposed for one of our neighborhoods, and we've had some really good conversations with Oakton Community College, which has some programming. And so instead of her, the next time she comes here, instead of her saying, oh yeah, we're committed to workforce development, right, she'll have a plan that has been worked on by their development in Oakton. And so I believe the person for us would be Nathan Norman, who's our workforce development manager. If you could reach out to him and kind of start that process early on of identifying not just, who we have in Evanston who could help in terms of providing the trade help we need, but to see who's available too, because some of this stuff is all about, scheduling it, and people may have different jobs that they're working on. So I just would love to see you start that process early.
And that's a great comment, Councilmember Burns. I would say the way we've drafted the construction jobs and job fairs, I think we're aligned there, and you have our commitment to make sure we reach out to the right folks and try to get that in place, because we do that a lot in the city of Chicago. Depending on the aldermanic ward, we try to really administer the goals of that specific ward. But we'll work with whoever you want to put. We'll follow up with Johanna and come back and make sure we're aligned there. But we totally get it. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Kelly for the last word.
Okay, and I just want to point out one of the most important features of this that I think we haven't really discussed is, and that Trammell Crow has agreed to, is that this will stay on the tax rolls. That there will be a covenant tied to the deed, the title, the deed, that would prevent this from ever coming off the tax rolls. Even if it were used for nonprofit purposes, the entire building will remain on the tax rolls. So, thank you.
Right. Okay. I will just close this discussion briefly by saying I too agree with my colleagues who have been saying how, what a really beautiful building this is going to be, and it's bringing a wonderful use to the downtown that we don't have anywhere in Evanston. I think we're all really looking forward to the vitality it's going to bring to that particular location. I think your public benefits are really, really public benefits, and I appreciate that. And so Councilmember Sufferton is apparently online with us, so we are going to do a roll call vote on Ordinance 15-0-22, amending the zoning map to rezone 1732-3440 Orrington Avenue from the D2 Downtown Retail Core District to the D3 Downtown Core Development District, and granting a special use for a new 10-story mixed-use plan development. So if you would call the roll, please.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn? Aye. Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. The motion passes, and
Thank you on behalf of our team.
see you at council.
Appreciate it. Okay.
Okay. So we have one more item now for discussion, and this is a discussion of our proposed tree preservation ordinance, where we want to discuss how we're going to protect trees on private property, and we have a presentation or a introduction to the topic. Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Committee Chair and members of the committee. My name is Emily Ogalau. I am Public Services Coordinator for the Public Works Agency, and I'm here tonight to discuss our recommendation that the committee provide direction for developing a tree preservation ordinance for trees on private property. So I'm here to entertain your questions, to answer your questions, and provide whatever information I can.
Great, thank you. And I know you've been out at a lot of our ward meetings and having conversations with the public, so you've been getting a lot of input, and appreciate your, and talking, I guess, with the Environment Board. And
that's right.
So, yep, a lot of work has gone into where we are this evening. So I'll open it up to committee members for comments, suggestions, thoughts. Councilmember Reed.
I'll just say thank you. You attended my ward meeting, the 8th Ward meeting. This is at this point a couple months ago, and gave a presentation on this that was very helpful to myself and 8th Ward residents. I will ask, what kind of direction are you looking for from us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to protect trees. We want to provide that protection, and we specifically want to protect the benefits that trees provide to the community. Trees are a resource and they have a value. In some cases, that can be monetized. But overall, they contribute to, the quality of life of the community. But we also recognize that, in asking the community to participate in protecting their trees, there could be some, unintended consequences. And we want to make sure that those consequences don't get in the way of other livelihood considerations of those community members. So, in essence, a lot of tree preservation ordinances require some sort of replanting, or they might require fees or whatever it is to replace the value of the benefits that are lost. But that could be an undue burden to, a certain, to the more vulnerable property owners in the community. And that's not a direction that we want to go in.
Thank you.
So Councilmember Suffredin has a light on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my question, and I'll go comment first. I think it's really important that we protect the rights of property owners as we make this policy. I understand the collective benefit of trees, but there are people who have purchased property, who pay taxes on it, on which these trees sit. How are we going to balance those interests, the interests of the community at large in having a vibrant tree canopy, and the interests of property owners in removing trees, trimming trees, making modifications to property that may require the removal of trees?
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's exactly why I'm here tonight, to seek direction, because that is, we feel that we need more direction in order to apply this in a way that would be equitable. There are formulas that exist. There are tree preservation ordinances that exist. We have one for public trees, but we certainly want to be cautious of the impact that would have. And so we've proposed that we would integrate this process into an iterative process, similar to the building, the building permits that community development works on. And so we've proposed that to create a conversation, to create a discussion, a way that community members can provide feedback. But beyond that, as far as actually replacing the value of trees, that's why we're here, asking for direction.
Right.
I got you. So, what is an example, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but can you give an example of a situation that this proposed ordinance, it's not really a proposed ordinance at this point, this idea would seek to prevent? I mean, have we had issues with people clear cutting their property, or is it more that people remove trees because they want to add an addition that is prevented by a tree? I mean, can you just help me understand the problem that we're seeking to solve? And I think that would inform the direction that you would be likely to get from this committee.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that there's a few things. So we know that trees become exponentially more valuable as they become larger. And we also know that trees provide benefits to the community at large, so not just the owner of that property. They provide benefits to really the entire community, but more specifically, it could be that that's the only tree that provides shade for children walking to school on that block. And so we also recognize that there are examples, and this is actually something I've encountered recently, of community members having goals for their properties And in some ways, they think that the goals are one thing, but in talking to them, their goals might be different. So very recently, I had a community member who asked us to prune a public tree in order to benefit the trees that she had on her private property. But really what she wanted on her private property was to have, good-looking landscaping on her private property, which she was not going to get even if we did prune the public tree because of the placement of the tree and the shade it was providing and the way the sun was coming in. And so in speaking to her, I was able to, find out what those goals were, find out exactly what her goal was, and come to an agreement with her about what would be the best way to achieve that goal that didn't require impacting a really large elm, I think it was, or maybe it was an oak, on the public parkway.
Okay, I don't want to monopolize everyone's time, so and since you are seeking direction, and I'm a member of the committee, I would say that my direction would be like really balance property owner rights with the rights of the collective on these trees. Find a way that there's not a structure that is financially punitive to people who remove trees, and really nail down how much increased staffing costs, whatever proposal will incur, because I think that's something that residents, even wherever they fall on the spectrum of property rights versus tree conservation, I think being very straightforward about what this is going to cost, if it is going to cost anything, is also something that is important when we come here with a finished product. And thank you for your efforts, Emily. I appreciate them.
Thank you. In the memo, we do discuss a staff position that would be required.
Okay, Councilmember Newsmith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will kind of pick up on Councilmember Suffredin's line of questioning. And first of all, say thank you for speaking up for the trees. I think they are an important part of our natural resource here in Evanston, and we've all committed to implementing our CARP plan. So what we're talking about here is very much part of that plan. So it's not a question of if we're going to do it, but how, and you're seeking that guidance. It would help me to provide that guidance if I had a better understanding of what the problem is and how many trees are being cut down on private property around the city. And if it's just a few here and there, that might dictate one response. If we have a whole bunch of Mr. T's cutting down, a forest on their property, that's another response. So where are we in that continuum?
So we have not had a tree preservation ordinance, so I don't know that we can know how many trees are being cut down on private property. We could look at remote sensing data to try to get an idea of how the tree canopy has changed. But we have seen that, especially larger developments that come in, including a very recent one, that those trees do get cut down. And in some ways, especially with the larger developments, we are seeing that those benefits are being taken away from the community. So essentially those developments are profiting and they're benefiting at the expense of the livelihood development of the people who live in this town.
So since we don't currently have a tree preservation ordinance that looks at private property, that means that any owner can cut down a tree on their property without any kind of repercussions.
With the exception of developments on properties that are larger than 2 acres.
Okay.
Yes.
But
so
they don't need a permit to cut down a tree?
No.
So we don't even have permit data that we can look to
No.
to give us some guidance?
No, it would be anecdotal or potentially remote sensing, but that's a little bit more, it's a lot more complicated.
So on the low-touch side of a potential tree ordinance, we could just impose a nominal permit fee for cutting down a tree on private property.
We could do that. The staff that I've spoken to in communities sort of surrounding Evanston have told me that has not prevented any type of removal. And so the question becomes, do we want to prevent removal, or do we want to understand what that removal is, or have, track it, or whatever it may be?
And on the other end of the spectrum, we could prohibit cutting down trees on private property. That might have some legal ramifications, but just to define the envelope of our discussion.
That's right.
Somewhere in between.
Sure, or a combination of it as well, right?
Got it.
So, I mean, Obviously not, either we allow it or we don't, but the combination would be that, we allow it under certain circumstances or with, certain remediation, or, we make the process more difficult, but potentially not more costly to the community.
Right. And when we're talking about cost, it's an equity consideration.
Yeah. So in the example that I gave in the memo, removing an 11-inch tree would be a cost under the current ordinance that we have, the tree preservation ordinance, it would cost approximately $3,500 in remediation costs to remove an 11-inch tree. Right. With the caveat that planting could happen, that property owner could plant trees on their own, potentially at a reduced cost.
Okay. Well, if you're looking for guidance, if a nominal permit fee is on one end of the spectrum at 0 and an exorbitant penalty for cutting down any trees is 10, I will say 2 or 3.
Right. Thank you.
If that's some quantitative guidance that I can provide.
But ultimately, our goal is actually to protect trees, right, and to preserve trees. And so even allowing a nominal fee or even allowing a smaller fee might not accomplish that goal of actually protecting trees.
Okay, I have a light from Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wynn, did you turn your light on? You're not, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, you did signal earlier. Go ahead, Councilmember Wynn.
So I actually have had examples of 2 residents in my ward who cut down trees, very large trees, that their neighbors actually protested about because one instance was part of the ward where the backyards are they were only 35 feet wide, and this was a large tree that shaded several neighbors, and because we didn't have anything that prevented that, that tree came down. And it's stark. I mean, it had to have been, it was easily 40 or 50 feet tall. Then I have had the instance of another example where someone wanted to build a garage, and it required the removal of a fairly significant Chinese elm, very large. And our zoning department, to their great credit, came up with several other designs that the property owner could have done and preserved the tree at not a significantly different cost. But the property owner there shrugged, and they had been requested by neighbors on both sides, please keep the tree up. They understood that they wanted to have a bigger garage, and they understood that, but the tree came down. And so I would like to see some teeth put into this, because both of those trees had to have been more than 40 or 50 years old. And I'd like to be at a 6 on Jonathan's scale to better understand what it is that, how to balance this. Because in the second instance, our staff really went the extra 2, 3, 4, 5 miles to come up with another plan for them. And I think actually if we had had some prohibition, that tree would still be there, and the neighbors would have achieved the garage that they maybe wasn't their ideal, but they would still have had what they wanted. And we would still have the benefits of that elm. So I would like to see, if you could send us some examples of ordinances that you think actually work, where we are properly balancing, and then a way to implement this so that someone doesn't buy, like Mr. T, buy his property and then suddenly decide, or whatever, maybe I guess now in Lake Forest, if you buy, you can't do what Mr. T did, but some way in which we let people know who purchase property in Evanston, we have a tree ordinance, and the trees above a certain size on your property are protected in these ways. So if that's helpful, I hope that, and I can talk to you more about it, but I do think having had those 2 instances in the last 4 years and seeing the impact that had, I would like to have something where, no, we may not have very many people do it, but the impact of a couple of people doing it, I would say affected at least 12 households, 12, 15 households.
Thank you for your comments.
Do you want to?
Well, I think, coming back to Councilmember Newsom's comment about, 0 to 10 or, whatever numbers, I'd like to reiterate that for us, the goal is not money, it's not cost, it's not coming up with, these exorbitant fees when trees are removed. It's more about making the process difficult to remove, especially the larger trees or the trees that have more significant impact, positive impact on the ecosystem.
So would that be a prohibition unless you could come in and prove a financial hardship or something like that?
It sounds like that might be one way to put it.
Right, that your goal is impossible to achieve, whatever that goal is. Your permitted goal of building a garage is impossible to achieve unless the tree comes down. And then, then we do some kind of balancing.
And so Lake Forest actually has language in their ordinance that says that, I don't know, it's property owners or whoever cannot be denied reasonable and enjoyable use of their property. Or so there's language that sort of protects against, of course, we would not want to tell, property owner that they can't build a garage,
right.
But maybe there's a better way to do it that would not significantly impact the trees.
But if we prohibited removal of trees, a homeowner could always apply for an exception.
Sure.
Right? And there are processes that already exist to allow variances to be considered and possibly granted.
Our hope is
it doesn't
that,
add cost, it adds some time, it adds some hassle.
right. Our hope is that the homeowner would participate in conversations, right? And that the homeowner would perhaps understand that there are ways to reach that goal without, cutting large trees down. That would be our hope.
Yeah.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. So 2 points or questions. One, I'd really love to see, as I think Councilmember Wynn said, some ordinances from other cities, and even here maybe from folks with ordinances in other cities to see how it's working, so that we could compare and see if those would fit our needs. But also, I wonder, Tom, also if this would be controversial, just to stop the bleeding, as I'm sure many of you have already heard about the incident at Kendall College. This was incredibly upsetting to many neighbors. A historic old oak grove. There were first one tree came down that residents it had gone through the Preservation Commission and everything, and one came down that they were hoping wouldn't, and then there was assurance that no more would come, and then last week during work, my phone and text was blowing up with neighbors. Nobody knew, including myself. The developer was there taking down more of these old historic oak trees, and this was incredible. I won't go through any more of the bloody gory details on this, but it was not a happy day for many people. So I wonder if we couldn't minimally, at least right now, just to stop a little bit of the bleeding, establish an ordinance for new development. If that would be in any way controversial to my fellow council members, to at least get that on the books right now. A tree ordinance for new development, and then we could see, we could discuss further about private homes.
So just a question, by new development, you mean, what if it's a new house, but it's taking the place of an old house? And
development as in, even if you're raising an old house and building new one, that would be new development.
Okay.
But I'm thinking more in terms of large developments, but yes, I think, like a tear down. Correct. But again, I'm thinking more of like the Kendall lot or whole large developments. But yes, the tear down, same idea. I would like to hear how people would feel about that, because that seems to me we could move swiftly on that to at least save some trees and then continue the discussion to see if we want to expand and deepen such an ordinance.
Director Neiden.
So just some clarification. I would say if it's a tear down, like a tear down house to new replacement, I don't know how many of those types of permits. I don't have that number in front of me, but I would say anecdotally, I think we've pulled some information that these trees are often taken out when people do additions or especially garages. So I think the instances in Councilmember Wynn's ward that she spoke of were I think both garages, because often smaller garages, a one-car thing, and now people all of a sudden want a three-car something, and So I just want to get clarification. You may not capture what you're trying to get by just a new construction house. We'd have to maybe put a quantification on an addition or a garage. Just a thought.
Actually, one of them was a tear down.
Okay. Well, I think if staff could maybe develop language around that. I mean, I remember even back when the Howe development went up on Pittner, there were a couple of trees on that property that came down that I know residents didn't, want to see come down, but it was within right. And so I think that would be helpful maybe to consider, because I have a feeling we could pass that.
So just to clarify, so are you suggesting the ordinance would prohibit taking down any trees, or are we still, because the other big issue in my mind is what would be the replacement fee that we would charge if the property owner does want to take a tree down? So would we, because we haven't really, there's a wide variety of a range of fees that our neighboring communities charge.
I'd like to get the variety of ordinances and take an opportunity
Sure.
to study those, to understand, how one community does this to balance that, and understand a little bit how they've achieved a balance. Obviously, this would be places that feel that it's successful to some degree.
I will say that I have yet to find one that actually is able to balance, what I can call equity and protecting trees. This is sort of an industry standard, this idea of charging replacement fees. Either having a flat fee or charging replacements is sort of, those are the ones that I've found so far.
But these small, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in, but just having a replacement tree, a little 2-inch caliper or 3-inch caliper really is not equivalent, even if you planted 100 of them, not equivalent to a 50-foot or 50-year-old elm.
Yeah, that's correct. There actually is no way, that's right, there is no way of planting a sufficient number of seedlings to accurately or to adequately replace the ecosystem benefits that are lost when a large tree is cut down.
Right. And for information about what our neighboring communities do, there's been a lot of recent coverage about the Wilmette, what's happening in Wilmette, because they're poised to adopt an ordinance to protect private trees. And so if you read the village minutes, which I looked at, there's a chart in there that shows the replacement fees that are charged by our neighboring communities, and they range from from like $100 up to, well, Kenilworth, I think it's Kenilworth that has the highest fee, and they go up depending on, of course, the size of the tree, and the bigger the tree, the more per inch the charge is, and everything. So that information is available. So Wilmette is going to be approving its ordinance on March 8th. So we'll see what they come up with, and they're trying to decide between basically a top rate of $125 per inch versus $175 per inch. If you had a 40 inch diameter tree, would you charge $175 per inch or $125? So that's one of the things they're looking at. But in the discussion in the minutes, they did say that the feedback from talking to some of these other communities is that, for some homeowners, they'll pay whatever it is and the tree is gone, and then yet there are other homeowners for whom that's a real financial burden. So I think the challenge for us is coming up with a way to protect trees that isn't a huge financial burden on some of our residents who can't really afford it. Mm-hmm. Councilmember Burns, then Councilmember Reed, and then Councilmember Suffredin.
Just a quick question. So we're saying residents who have the money to pay to take down a tree but don't have money to pay for the fine? I'm just trying to understand this. Where's the equity issue along with the fines? Because you said to cut down the tree is how much again?
So are you asking like how much it would cost if you were to hire a tree care company?
Yeah. Because we're not saying we're going to do it for them, right?
No, absolutely not. No. It depends on the size of the tree. If we're thinking about the very large oak tree that came down at Kendall College, that would probably cost $4,000 out of pocket, maybe more, depending on a number of things, how easy access it is, and what condition the tree is in, or whatever else. It also depends on the company. It just depends on so much, right?
So we're saying that household doesn't have enough money to pay for the. I'm just trying to get that part
I'm not
right.
talking about the cost of taking down the tree to the cost of the homeowner. The cost of the fee that the city would charge if they wanted to take down their private tree. So that's what we're talking.
No, that's what I think we're talking about. But you're concerned that you don't want the fee to be too high on the homeowner that already paid $3,500 to take down a tree, is what I'm saying. Am I understanding that?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
Right.
I'm worried less about that individual, I'm going to be honest. I think if you have the money to pay $3,500 to take down a tree, you probably could handle the fee associated with it, the fine associated with it. I'm definitely leaning more towards, we either want to protect the trees or we don't. We have a long list of things that, our trees contribute to our community. I see property value, storm water, CO2, air quality. So I think we just need to make a decision, but I'm not as concerned. If someone has $4,000 to take down a tree, I think they can handle whatever the fee is. But again, I'm leaning more towards just, you don't cut it down unless you provide a reason as to why you're cutting it down, right? And, we should come up with that list and figure out what that looks like. But it's either we're going to allow somebody to do it for aesthetic purposes or we're not, right? Or we're going to allow them to do it to make room for a garage or not. Like, we have to be, that's where I'm at. Like, I don't think somebody should be able to do it just for aesthetic purposes. In the Fifth Ward, what I'm more concerned about, though, is because it's not a lot of people, whether they have it or not, that want to spend $4,000 to take down a tree. I've not heard anybody that has done that, at least so far on my term. What I hear more so of is people who have an unhealthy tree, right, who need help, to prune it and to even inspect it to know whether or not it needs to come down, and then some financial assistance to take it down if need be, or to prune it, et cetera. And so, do we have any? So, first question is, with this arborist we're going to hire, will it improve our ability to inspect trees on private property? Is the first question.
So to provide feedback to the homeowner on the quality and the health of the tree?
Exactly.
I don't know if I can speak to that.
Good evening, Committee. Edgar Cano, Public Services Bureau Chief and Acting Public Works Agency Director. Yes, the hiring of another certified arborist would give us more personnel to be able to go and evaluate the trees, while the Forestry Department that we currently have at the staffing levels are able to focus on their jobs which we are very much behind on.
Yeah, because there was a Fifth Ward resident on Hovland that came to me, was concerned about a tree's health. They were in a dispute trying to determine whether or not it was on the church's property or the property owner's property, and where they live. And during all and then I had Michael Callahan come out. He said that he felt like the tree would need to come down. He said if it was on my property, I would take it down. But during all of this, we had the big storms. The resident who's renting at this home was concerned about the tree falling into the home, and it did after the big storms, right? So I'm more so concerned about that, like someone who identifies, who's income eligible, right, that identifies an unhealthy tree on their property. How can we help them? That's really where what I'm concerned about. And then to the other issue, again, I think we should just provide very clear direction when you can do it and when you can't. That's my opinion.
And right now, without this ordinance, we really can't give our, we can give our opinion, but there's nothing stopping them for if we say, hey, this tree does need to come down, or there's some dangers associated with it. Again, it's their property, and they get to do what they want as of right now.
Councilmember Reed, and then Councilmember Suffredin.
Yeah. To the point there, so Edgar, you may want to stay there. That is my concern too. I will also agree that while Right now, we're actually discussing the preservation of trees. I do agree that that is an issue, and I've had a similar concern. But did I understand correctly? Did in response to Councilmember Burns' question, did you say that this new position, if added, would be inspecting trees on private property?
As it pertains to this ordinance, yes.
Okay, but it wouldn't be, someone couldn't just, because this ordinance wouldn't cover someone calling in and saying, hey, there's a tree in my backyard that I think might not be healthy. Can you come inspect it for me and let me know if it's healthy or not? That doesn't seem like that'd be covered by the ordinance.
No, and I'm sorry if I misunderstood. We wouldn't just arbitrarily go respond to a phone call saying, can you come? There's a dispute between two neighbors or things of that. Again, that's a civil matter that we would.
Now, take the dispute away. It's clear that the tree is on someone's property, private property. They call in and say, hey, can you inspect the tree so you can tell
without
me?
the dispute, what he's saying.
So I'm going to jump in there. That's where property standards would come in, and property standards could work with Public Works to cite, and there have been other properties in the 7th Ward that have had tree issues that I can think of, that where we had to manage that issue. It was on a tree on private property. We have to go on. It sounds like that might have gotten to that level to property standards, but then the storm happened and the tree came down and it became a different matter.
I just want to make sure.
You can have.
No, because you brought in the question again, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. I'm saying I own the home and the land. It is the tree on the land. I have a tree on the land. I want to call the city to ask if you can come inspect the tree so that I know whether or not it needs to come down. There's no dispute. I know it's my tree. It's on my land. I'm not renting. I'm the homeowner. Do we provide that service?
I think that's a private.
No,
So
I'm
the
sorry.
answer
I
is,
got six.
if I can, hold on, if I can reclaim my time. So the answer is no, from what was just said here, and I want to continue my flow.
That you brought in, can you please answer that question?
Yeah, because it's on private property, the answer is no.
Okay.
That's what I want to clarify. Now you messed up my train of thought. I'll move on to someone else and come back.
Okay, Councilmember Suffredin.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Listening to the discussion, I wonder, would it be better to compensate people for hosting these trees? I mean, listening to the examples that Councilmember Wynn gave, where you have, and it's not unique to the situation she described, but where you have a tree located in one yard that provides shade to 4 other properties, it seems like it's unfair to tell that person, hey, you can't do anything with this tree, but your neighbors can all have 3-car garages because you're the one providing shade for them. When we're talking about replacement trees, it sounds like they're inferior trees that will need a long time to grow. Is there any consideration been given, or I guess if we're at the beginning stages, is it possible we give some consideration to compensating owners whose property has these trees? Because I know, there are people who have to rot their sewers on a regular basis. I mean, the trees don't come without costs, and we're saying that it's in the interest of the community for these trees to continue to exist, and we will come at you with something punitive if you choose to cut it down. Is there room to explore some sort of compensation structure for properties that host these trees?
In my opinion, I don't think that would be the best way to go. Again, I can understand compensating and, whatever that nominal amount would be, but I feel that the property owner would feel that the addition of a garage or the addition to their house would be of a greater benefit and, a better financial situation for them to actually take down the tree and build that garage than to get any kind of financial from the city to keep it.
Okay, well, let me just give you like a quick example of what maybe I'm talking about. It's not going to solve the problem, but we have people. It's a common complaint that I have to pay to water parkway trees. I pay the city for the water that then I put into the parkway to nourish the city's tree. Maybe we could give people a credit, for sewer rotting or whatever things are caused by trees. A lot of times when a tree is cut down, it's not diseased. It's just that it's an annoying thing to have on your property, and it's your property. maybe we can compensate people for some of that inconvenience, and that would help solve some of the problems it sounds like we're trying to solve, although I'm not totally convinced that we've established that it's a real widespread problem. But I get why we're here, and so I just want to throw that out there that, you know, maybe approaching residents with some sort of incentive rather than threatening a punishment could get us to a better place.
Again, I'm sorry, now I lost my train of thought. No, again, the main goal is to obviously save the trees. With the amount of trees that we do have currently in Evanston, a program like that, again, discussing how much the fee structure or the pay structure would be to a resident if they keep it. I mean, that could be just an exponential amount of money that the city would be paying out for somebody to just maintain a tree on their property. So, and again, we're not trying to make it punitive. We don't want, you know, to cause a burden to anyone. The goal of it is to try to save trees. It's part of our CARP plan, and this was discussed as part of it that was voted on and agreed upon by council. We're just looking at ways to try to accomplish this. So again, if being punitive, or whether it's at a financial burden or making it difficult for the property owner or the developer to obtain a proper permit to remove the tree, we're just trying to you know, seek some kind of direction. Again, all ideas are welcome, Councilmember Sufferton. You know, I just think we do need to focus on one path so that we can devote our time to it. You know, we've been coming here for, I think, 2 years now, trying to get some direction. And again, if we could just get, whether it's, let's get a fee structure, but it's not too much money, or let's make it a more difficult process for the permit where they have to show excessive burden. I mean, anything.
Well, okay, then I appreciate it. My direction, and again, I'm just part of this committee, would be do what you need to do to protect the trees, but don't screw Evanston homeowners while you're doing it.
That isn't our intention.
I appreciate that. I know it's not.
And even though we're talking tonight about protecting trees, our CARP plan talks about expanding our tree canopy. I mean, we would like to see even more trees than we have right now. So, Councilmember Reed, then Councilmember Kelly, then Councilmember Newsma.
Okay, so I did want to reiterate another point based on what Councilmember Ravel was saying to another point that was made. You know, if we do institute a fine and we were to follow in line with what, I'm sorry, did you say Wilmette or Winnetka?
Oh, I was talking about Wilmette.
Okay, that in line with what Wilmette is doing, you know, for, you know, at that low end, $120 per inch. For a 20-inch tree, that's a $2,400 fine. For a 40-inch tree, which would be a fairly substantial tree, that's a $4,800 fine on top of whatever you have to pay. So that'd make, you know, the total cost like $8,000 to take down a tree. I don't know if I'm opposed to that necessarily. I do think there should be, as Councilmember Burns was reiterating, there should be some clear paths where folks are able to take down a tree without having to pay that fine. So certainly if there's a danger to your house, obviously you should take it down, no cost.
Yep,
no. But if you're, and I think the way that we can ensure that someone who's just building a garage, and God forbid, a garage is the worst reason to take down a tree, you know, more car infrastructure to take down a tree. But if someone is building a garage and they want to take down a tree, then I definitely think they should pay the fee. And also, you know, we during the garage permitting process, I think we would be able to determine, Johanna, correct me if I'm wrong, if there's a tree that would have to be taken down as a part of that process. I mean, I think it could either be a question or we could verify that somehow.
The memo outlines that we'd have some kind of application. So just like we perform a review to make sure that you can follow things per the zoning code, we would do something similar. They'd put the tree down, we'd go, but that's where that additional position would really have to come into play. You'd have to, I think when we've talked about this for the past couple of years, we wanted to have a very long lead time in terms of when we would be, not too long, because this is certainly an urgent, I think we've understood this to be urgent, but we want to make sure we get that person in place, because we can't start collecting and requiring an application without the staff. We can barely keep up with the permit activity in community development, and I know our colleagues in Public Works are having a challenge just keeping up with the public tree canopy issues.
Yeah, and I will say, if we're going to start putting out ideas for where we're drawing lines that say, if you're making a garage in addition to your house and it's a garage, I think you need to pay this. If you're expanding your house because you have a new child and you need another room, I don't know if that should be something that we'd fine you for. But I do think we need a very clear list of what where you'd pay the fine and where you wouldn't pay the fine. So I'm in line with that. I think I don't know if it's still a question. I heard it brought up at the beginning, but to the legality of this, I mean, we have zoning codes and design codes and all kinds of things that regulate what you can and can't do on your property, and I don't think a tree ordinance would be much different than deciding whether the materials that you use on the facade of your house are appropriate or not for a neighborhood. So I think this is perfectly in line with those principles. So very supportive, and I'd just love to see what kind of list, given the feedback here, you all come back with kind of delineating what you think appropriate uses are for not having the fees and what appropriate uses are for having the fees. And then I don't know if we discussed, I think there's some consensus up here on the fees. Is that maybe? And if there
well, I mean, we haven't said definitely one dollar amount versus another, but
Sure.
I think I'm getting, except for Councilmember Suffredin, the feeling that that we are interested in having a replacement fee that's not excessive, and that there's a real process that the property owner goes through, developing a plan and being as part of that process, sort of learning more about why the tree is really valuable and seeing if there isn't some kind of compromise. So I think that's where we're headed, most of us on this committee.
Councilmember Ravel, just if I can interject really quickly in response to Councilmember Reed, I appreciate your comments, and I think that's precisely what we're looking for is, direction on what those clear guidelines would be. It sounds like maybe fees would be fees, but there would be opportunity for relief based on, the specific circumstances of those households. And that's actually precisely where we are stuck, right? Is defining what those guidelines would be and where that relief would come, which types of households or projects.
Yeah.
So, Councilmember Kelly, you had your light on once upon a time.
One more thing with the remainder.
And we really need to wrap this up because.
Yeah, but just one more thing on guidance. Okay. I laid out some things that I thought were important. Again, a garage, pay the fine, providing affordable housing. If you're building an affordable housing, I think maybe development, I think maybe that we can cut you out of the fee. So that's what I'm thinking along those, environmental impact. If whatever you're doing has a negative environmental impact, you're probably going to need to pay the fees. If you're providing housing and stuff like that for people, you probably don't need to pay the fees. That's kind of where I am. Thank you.
Okay. So, Councilmember Kelly, did you?
Yeah, just quickly again, just to sort of reiterate what I said before, but I think I just don't want to see this drag out like sort of the leaf blower ordinance, and I feel like we could move right away on large new developments or new construction that are multi-unit, because I don't think anybody would object here to that, and we could get that done, I think, quickly. So, for example, there's the Kendall lot, there's the 1900 Sherman. I have people at Sherman Gardens ask me, please save the large evergreen. I think, I don't think anybody here would object to having an ordinance that protected trees on new large construction developments. Thank you.
Although even just a straightforward, that'll still take us time.
Right,
So
but I don't think we would. I think an ordinance, a proposal working that would protect trees on that. I think that we could move relatively quickly.
Right. I guess I'd rather see us really focus on moving ahead with this more comprehensive approach.
I'd like to see it amended then to include more, but I'm afraid that we might be here a year from now.
Councilmember Nusma.
I haven't lost my.
Right.
I haven't lost my train of thought. I would like to take this train to the station and leave it there for the evening. And I'm going to recommend or suggest or ask about the possibility of that station being the Environment Board. I assume you've spoken with the Environment Board about this issue. Would it make sense to put this issue, to refer this to the Environment Board for them to kind of formulate the policy and then come back to us with a fully baked proposal?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to propose that to them. I have asked them for their recommendations, that's included in this memo, so those have already been integrated, but I could certainly ask them for further recommendations and ask them for those guidelines.
Yeah, I would feel comfortable referring this.
I don't think it needs a second, but I do support that.
Yeah.
My thought was this: we have a lot of kind of working groups formed just to do deeper exploration on these type of questions. This needs a more thorough discussion on a panel that isn't this panel. So I would support that.
I will just say that I don't know if I wonder if like a zoning committee or some other committee that deals more with, I get there certainly there's an environmental aspect to this, but this also is very heavily, it's planning and it really is planning and development, very much kind of zoning type things. And I'd wonder if that expertise, I mean, we're very clear. We understand the environmental impact of trees. I don't think that's really a question. Really the question I think we're hearing is more about fine structure, and other things that have very little to do with the environment. So I'll just note that.
Well, and also keep in mind, it has to do with equity. So yes, it's environmental planning, but we want to make sure that whatever is proposed, whether it's by the environment board or by staff, that council is on board feeling that it's equitable enough. And that's pretty much the direction, the base we wanted to start at. If it's like, okay, this was what we can find to be an equitable state, build off on that. So, I mean, again, we can take it to the environment board, but just please keep in mind.
We've got bright people on the environment board who can solicit advice where they where they need it. So I'd feel comfortable referring this to environment board.
So would I. Director Nyden, did you have?
I was just going to add to your point, Councilmember Reed. I think the bigger issue is what is the goal that we're trying to accomplish, and then we can build a fee structure or a process from there. I don't think that our land use commission, they're not familiar with the internal workings of how we process permits. We have people who work in the city who don't even know how we process permits. So that's okay, but I think, give us the problem we're trying to specifically solve, and then we can apply the process once we have it.
And so your thought is the environment board can figure out what the
and
problem
that's
is.
right, and
Okay,
that's perfectly appropriate, and then we can work together as staff to come back with how that would work in a process and a fee structure and an ordinance.
Right, yeah.
I think that would be a motion to refer this. I think it was motioned and seconded, so
Okay,
that we should.
then I guess we need a roll call since we're partly virtual. This is a motion to refer this item to the Environment Board and ask them to give us some more specific guidance.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn? Aye. Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
All right, motion passes, and I believe I'm going to declare us adjourned, ready for council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
2 minutes.
Wait, what was that? In 7 minutes, 20 to the next hour, 20 to 8.